Diego Maradona, a flawed sporting superstar. I think that's a fair assessment. That'll be a very short video if that was just my sole assessment, but I will say this, there are some key flashpoints in his career that divide opinion. The Copa del Rey final against Athletic Bilbao, which led to his transfer to Napoli in 1984. The Hand of God against England in 1986. The penalty shootout against Italy in Italia 90. And his failed drugs test in World Cup 94. I think they're the four major flashpoints in his career that you can say some people look at Maradona in a more divisive way. The Copa del Rey final happens on a backdrop of rising Basque and Catalan nationalism and political unrest in Spain, following a failed military coup. It led to a riot. Let's just say that. Let's just keep it like that. It was a very ill-tempered game between Athletic Bilbao from the Basque Country and Barcelona from Catalonia. Very ill-tempered, flared tensions, bad, nasty game. A lot of bad challenges. Maradona reacts to a bad challenge. He reacts, he gets physical, and then it descends into a brawl. And then the fans start fighting each other. And the Guardia Civil are a little bit heavy-handed in their response to the fan unrest and the player unrest. It's a very ugly scene. It led to his transfer to Napoli. At Napoli, he helped transform that side from a middling mid-table Serie A side with a lack of success to a double Scudetto winner in Serie A. There is no denying his impact on Napoli and how he is still loved by the fan base today. The club president has announced they're going to rename the stadium the Diego Maradona Stadium in Naples. He is revered in southern Italy. They love him there. He is like God. The people have made shrines, religious shrines with Maradona's icon in them. He's that revered. People have that much of a connection with the man that transformed their club from no-hopers to well-beaters in his time there. His time at Sevilla, there's a famous quote from Gascoigne who says, I spent 3 days on the lash, I went to Disneyland, went on the piss, playing this European game. He's in the tunnel and goes, Maradona is next to him in the tunnel. And quite Gascoigne, he says, he told Maradona he'd been on the juice for 3 days, quite drunk, partied hard. And he said, I'm really hanging. I've got a real bad hangover. Maradona said to him, don't worry, so do I. So he had that playboy kind of personality off the field. He could share a joke about it on the field with the opposition in Paul Gascoigne. Very similar type player. Great talent, flawed off the field. Maradona, and even greater talent, massively flawed off the field. Two brilliant players whose careers did derail quite rapidly towards the end with their off-field indiscretions and antics, which did harm their ability to play at their potential. That's what's scary about Maradona. From 1983 through to about 95, it is well documented that for 12 years, Maradona was a cocaine addict. He also liked a bit of speed. Obviously, he got his drugs ban at USA 94. His final appearance was against Nigeria in the group stages. He scored his final goal for Argentina against Greece, the thundercracker in a 4-0 win. And his international career ended on a sour note. Can you imagine how good Maradona would have been had he played sober? That is what is generally terrifying. The fact he appeared in 2 World Cup finals and also won a Youth World Cup final as well. So basically 3 World Cup finals, winning 2 of them. One at under 20 level in 1979. Can you imagine how good Maradona would have been had he been sober that entire time? That is what's generally terrifying. Is that he was world class from about 1977 through to about 1992, whilst in the majority of that time he was high as a kite. Can you imagine how good Maradona would have been had he not been abusing cocaine, amphetamines and alcohol in that period? You look at George Best and Paul Gascoigne as the 2 best examples I can think of superstar players, be it at club or international level, who, with their off-field playboy indiscretions, hampered their actual ability to play at their potential. And Paul Gascoigne at Italia 90, he won the hearts of a nation. Maradona in 86 won the hearts of a nation with their playing performances. If you were to ask Argentinian club fans, I think River Plate and Newell's Old Boys, they may have a bit more of a negative interpretation of Maradona because he played for Boca Juniors. Even so, he's still revered as a god in Argentina. There are some that revere him as a little bit of like, you let the side down in '94, you failed drugs test, you shamed the nation. But for the most part, he's god. No other Argentinian player before or since has the same status as Maradona. Bear in mind, this is a country that has produced Kempes, Ozzy Ardiles, Ricky Villa, Gabriel Batistuta, Diego Simeone. Maurizio Pochettino is obviously Argentinian. There have been some brilliant players. Messi. You could possibly... Messi is, I think, the only equal to Maradona in how he is beloved by football fans. Yet, Maradona still divides opinion. And there's the Copa del Rey final, the hand of God. But it was his will to win in that tournament that led to the hand of God. The penalty shootout against Italy in Italia 90. Okay, that rubbed some Napoli fans up the wrong way who never forgave him for that. But that's how passionate, obviously, football is. And in Italia 90, you can definitely see that his powers have peaked and his off-field cocaine habit is clearly affecting his ability to play. His weight is all over the place. He had to have a gastric bypass, I think, in 94 or 95 or 96, towards the end of his playing career with Boca Juniors when he returned home. He had to have a gastric bypass because his weight problem was getting out of control. He's only 5'8". So to be obese at 5'8" doesn't take a lot. He then had several heart problems, which obviously led to his untimely death of a heart attack. He had a brain hemorrhage or a brain aneurysm, which required his hospitalisation shortly before his passing. His health issues are well documented in the later half of his life. But you cannot deny his playing ability on the field. And there's going to be 2 goals that I mentioned. I've already spoken about the hand of God. But that second goal against England, where he runs pretty much 3/4 of the length of the field, goes through 8 or 9, I think it's 8 English players he beats, and then slots the ball on a Shilton, and Shilton comes out to stop him. And his goal against Belgium in the semi-final, where Prudhomme, how is he going to stop that rocket? Where he does a similar run, but then he swivels on his hips, and the way he shoots it, it's hard to describe, but I think the goal against Belgium in the semi-final is possibly a better goal than the one he scores in the quarter-final against England to make it 2-0. That, for me, is the better goal. If you look at the 2 goals, there is no denying that goal against Belgium is possibly one of the greatest individual efforts of all time. Where he picks the ball up, how he runs with it, how he scores it, twisting his body as he does so. The physics make no sense in that goal. But then you look at it and go, he did revolutionise the role of a roaming forward player. He wasn't really an attacking midfielder and he wasn't really a centre forward or a striker. He roamed. That's what made him so dangerous. Not only could he score goals, maybe not as prolifically as Pele or Messi or Ronaldo or Garrincha or Jorginho in 1970, who scored in every match of the World Cup. It was his ability to bring other players into play. There are some people who say he single-handedly won Argentina the World Cup in 1986. I think that is a false narrative. You had Burruchaga and Valdano, I think, to assist him, plus a whole host of other players who were pretty good, because that same squad pretty much made it to the World Cup final 4 years later, with Carlo Caniga in there. And then in 92 and 94, you had Batistuta, Simeone, Ayala coming through. And by 98, that second crop of players with a Hernan Crespo coming in, he inspired these guys to play when he was playing. If it wasn't for Maradona, we wouldn't have had Hernan Crespo, we wouldn't have had Gabriel Batistuta, we wouldn't have had Diego Simeone, we wouldn't have Ayala, we wouldn't have had Javier Zanetti, because they wouldn't have been inspired to play or reach that potential. He inspired other young Argentinians, including Lionel Messi, to play and idolise to be him. If it wasn't for Maradona, we wouldn't have had these players come through and play at World Cups and entertain us in the Champions League and the Europa League and in club football in Italy, Spain, Germany, France, England, around the world. He is revered in his home country and around the world. He does divide opinion, and yes, his off-field antics do that. And the only comparables I can think of in the the same sort of time frame as George Best and Paul Gascoigne. George Best died 15 years to the day before Maradona. His off-field indiscretions of alcohol abuse, primarily alcoholism, did derail his career and affected his ability to play. Very famously, George Best was playing for Man United at the time, and he was so drunk that at half-time he's not playing well at all, but they can't afford to take him off because he is their best player. So the manager, I think it was Shankly, basically ordered coffee to be made black and forced down his throat. He scores a hat-trick in the second half, and the famous interview, I believe it was with John Motson, and it's on the radio, BBC Radio. He's interviewing George Best. He goes, the hat-trick, how do you feel about it? George Best didn't even realise he'd scored a hat-trick. That's how drunk he was for that game. Paul Gascoigne, the tequila celebration at Euro 96. We didn't know at the time as fans that Gascoigne was having a drink and drug problem. We saw him as this cheeky chappy, who had that cheeky personality and played with his heart on his sleeve, very much like Maradona. He's a poor man's Maradona, is Paul Gascoigne. But in reality, imagine how good Paul Gascoigne would have been had he been sober. The same with Maradona. Well, probably the greatest player of all time, if not one of the greatest of all time. Can you imagine if Maradona had been sober his entire career? I'll leave that thought with you. Thank you very much for watching. Please place your thoughts below, and I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.